I am Mesmuvasitan. And in this part of the story, it looks like Garnet is heading on an express ticket to Marijuanaville. Well, keep going and you'll find out what I mean by that. Last time we checked, Garnet was continuing with the mission, finding the door that was in the video that Lapis sent him, using the mental keyword door lock to open it, killing some ring thugs along the way, after expecting to lose a limb before it even began. Thankfully, the loaned Gladius and coat of Virgilius, the Red Gaze, not only helps him with taking the beating, but also dishing it out. Thank you, Stigma Workshop! Yes, that's likely what the heating mechanism of the Gladius was made by. After catching up with Rikoko and Nunsiul, they proceeded to knock the researchers out, and then had a debate on what to do with the captured children / experimental test subjects. Where Rikoko's arguments can be summed up with, we need to focus on the mission. Welcome to reality. Get used to it. Despite Garnet wanting to free them. Well, regardless, they were then interrupted by Maestro Jumsun, who had another way of getting there. Either that or he went ahead of Virgilius and Garnet. It turned out that he was glad that Garnet was there. He made this clear after Nunsiul revealed that he sold them out by stabbing Rikoko in the back. Now, Master Jumsun was either the one that attacked the orphanage, or he just exploited something that happened regardless of his involvement. But he wanted all of those that was in that orphanage as test subjects for the identities mechanic, or what would become it. As an artistic effort? All this because Virgilius, the Red Gaze, stopped visiting. Then, just as Garnet was about to attack the Maestro of the Ring in rage, Nunsiul, on his new master's order, pulled the lever which made something hit Garnet, and it made his perception of reality shift. We pick up immediately from the last part of this story, with the sound of rifts echoing throughout the lab. The children in the machines were spitting out unintelligible things, screams and painful wails. Sounds worse than some series that you'd find on streaming services, and in this case, it probably is. Garnet heard, "Stop. Please. I don't want to see." And I'm looking into myself. He understood what that last utterance meant, as he could see something similar. A myriad of scenes unfolding in a flash before his eyes. All was him, with his back turned, accessing countless versions of himself. Oh, so that's what Denver saw earlier. It was terrifying to him, yet the sight was also tranquil. He was unsure what to feel during this. It all started to distort and blur together, as there was too much to keep up with. Much like a game of Tetris set at the highest possible speed. Then all of the alternates looked at him, and his eyes met theirs. Then he fell, or at least felt that, well, like he was falling endlessly, and suddenly he found himself in a different place, in a different outfit. He was on his knees, wailing in the heavy rain, which was mild compared to the storm in his heart. The despair was overwhelming. Then it was revealed what reality he was in. He was in Lulu's place, a member of the Streetlight Office, a Zwei Association affiliate, an urban myth grade office that was as unremarkable as the pay was unimpressive. It wasn't at all famous. It was at this point that Lulu lost Mars, but in this case, Garnet lost Lapis, when their operator pulled him away before they could both be turned into books in the library. It's possible that it might be San in this reality, but it could also be Virgilius. Well, regardless of who the operator of that office in that reality is, Garnet had similar words to Lulu, asking the stupid idiot Lapis why. Apparently in this reality, Lapis might have replaced the cake in the fridge, after getting into a fight with Garnet over that, much like Lulu and Mars did. Although she did have an umbrella when it rained at some point in the past, replying to his grumbles in a sassy tone. Oh, so we're dealing with two Sundaras in this scenario. He was determined to get Lapis's book from the library. Well, we know how it ended for Lulu, don't we? After he was determined to do this, he let out a loud scream, due to the emotions building up inside. Then, as the light that he was under was fizzling, his surroundings blurred, and he saw another him, not wanting to avoid the glare. Then he found himself in a reality where he was addressed as Director, asking how something like that could be considered tolerable. Garnet saw a desk piled high with papers. He was calm, despite the lack of calm of the fixers around him, upset at the immediate injustice, too eager to argue it with logic, even at things that might seem insignificant. It was then revealed that he was in Yujin's role in that reality, wearing the red and black that you would expect of the She Association. And he was the director of She Association South Section 2, which is an urban play level group. Both saw the southern branch of the She Association as rotten and morally bankrupt. As morally bankrupt as a country in our reality under autocratic rule. He aimed to deal with the rot within that organization, much like the Ravens, the internal affairs group of Arcorp, would do to pacts that violate specific regulations. Regardless, they've not had proper sleep for 10 days, and Garnet told them to suppress their feelings, and that the only things that truly matter in that city are money, fame, and power. Then he remembered that fixers of affiliated offices, like the Full Stop office, were killed off. Although in that particular case, it was due to the library. thanks to some coercion by Argalia, the Blue Sicko. He was even summoned to the Section 3 director to demand that he report what he was up to. He replied that he planned to fix what was broken. This didn't have a positive response, as that director chain-smoked a pack of death sticks in one sitting. Garnet was unsure why the Section 3 director wanted to help with this, as they planned to retire the following year. Section 3 was close to annihilation, and Section 2 wasn't far behind. Section 4 was pretty much done. It was Garnet's job to hearten his subordinates, to assure them that everything was fine with a tone of confidence. But it wasn't easy. Yet he wasn't planning for them to do a suicide mission. He then looked out of the window, and his surroundings distorted again, and his eyes met another. Then he found himself in a far less secure position, but also a less life-threatening one. He felt broiling heat at dawn. So it must be summer, as the fan wasn't good enough to make it cooler. Well, it wasn't entirely new or intact, let's be honest. He needed to be up by 6 due to him working a decent post at a local library, while also avoiding the attention of the landlord. It was early enough to avoid that one, as rent was overdue by 2 months. The landlord was forgiving at first, but no longer. Garnet then said that he could use some gas, and then kept writing and deleting text messages. He was from a rural area. His parents didn't know how expensive things were in a big city. Yes, that immediately arouses suspicion. A rural area? Was this a reality before the rise of the head, or a reality where certain things like the Mechanical Rebellion or the rise of the head never happened? Let's keep moving on, see what the case is. As for Garnet's parents, they think that he takes the midnight shift to make some extra money. But it's not want in this case, it's need. As the midnight shift was to cover things like gas, water, and electric bills. And that's not considering things like food to sustain himself, along with travel expenses to get to work and back, along with other things. They felt assured that their son and his academic excellence as the top of his class would put him and his family on the road to luxury. How deluded can they be? Education by itself counts for nothing in this world. And as far as the grimdark world that Garnet originated from, even more so. Apparently, he applied for a lesser university to secure scholarships, taking a semester off to make a living. He was also busy in a barbecue restaurant serving customers things like samgyeopsal, or grilled pork belly, along with other meat dishes, while others were flying in and out of the country, building international experience and studying abroad. It sounds close to our world, doesn't it? Especially as the work ethic of East Asia is known to be too strong to be healthy, along with strong expectations regarding education. He asked where it went wrong. Yeah, I know, you're not the only one. He could only come up with the following conclusion. He tried and failed to qualify for jobs. His lack of effort got him rejected. He thought that it's because he slept more than they'd like him to, or he bought one more piece of clothing than he could afford, or he bought some food that wasn't instant ramen. That he studied less and worked more to make ends meet, or some temptation got the better of him, likely putting personal life over personal advancements. He had this feeling that he wasn't trying hard enough, and so wasn't good enough. Yep, that sounds like the East Asian work ethic. It can be a killer. In Japan, it's called karoshi, or working to death. Yes, I know that finances are something to consider, but too little sleep can affect your health more. Also, there are toxic work environments where they believe that if you don't work harder for less, you're just not trying hard enough. It's unhealthy to work 60 hours a week, never mind up to 100 hours a week, as some do in China. You know those that keep Fortnite running? Well, that's one example of this, sadly. I know, consuming the product while ignoring the process in which that product is made. Either that or you just don't care. Sickening, isn't it? Anyway, Garnet left his cramped lodgings. Yeah, a place to live in a major city is more expensive at the best of times. And yes, I can say that with confidence as I have a cousin that lives in London. She's able to afford a place there because she knows how to make delicatessen quality confectionery. It's why when she comes to visit or I visit her, in both cases in a family gathering, I don't bring confectionery, as she has that part of the food covered. She's quite modest about it now. As for Garnet, he clearly didn't understand how to make a good impression during a job interview, as when he was asked what he desired to be as a child, his reply was that he wished that he could be rich enough to take a hot bath in winter. Yeah, that's not something that a potential employer wants to hear about, or will be impressed about. That employer, if they were a psychopath, would probably think something like, "Your aspirations are pathetic." Garnet was considering getting another job, where he'd get up at 4 every morning. Seriously? You're straining yourself enough as it is! He checked his phone and looked up job openings. One offer that interested him was a gym receptionist. It was part-time, and it paid well enough for the hours advertised, where he might find enough time to study during his shift, if he asked the owner nicely. I find that unlikely. He was immersed in his thoughts under the blazing sunlight. Then he saw that people were fleeing in terror, screaming at the plane that was flying lower than usual. He asked, when did an airplane fly above the city? He wasn't even sure which district he was in, implying that Garnet's real memories were surfacing, that this was an unfamiliar place. He was feeling nauseous at this unfamiliar environment. He knew that he couldn't outrun that aircraft. Like he's losing his struggle against poverty. He couldn't escape the explosion that the plane would cause as it crashed into the street. All because he was too slow, too incapable. His thoughts during this included that he should have taken out life insurance, that he could also remember seeing his father's back as he carried the cauldron of water he boiled with their barely functioning gas stove. That was the last image in his mind as the explosion killed the Garnet of that reality. Then he saw another version of him, as the perception of reality shifted once more. Then, in an ironic twist, he found himself as Master Garnet of the Ring, in the middle of hosting an auction, where they were bidding for an orange gemstone made from carnelian, a subject procured from an orphanage in District 22. So Virgilius's office is in V-Corp territory. And yes, remember that Philip was a destructive waxy angel of death in the nest of that district. The back streets were mostly left intact. As for Carnelian, they were described as a shy kid who only nodded and shaked heads instead of speaking. But Garnet was taught to whistle with grace. Then Garnet examined himself. He was in the attire of a ring maestro. Next to him was an auctioneer, excitedly following raised hands and chanting bids. That stone went for 5 million arm. He was brought back to reality as it was there, and examined the item, seeing them as gems that must discover that they will possess unparalleled beauty if you kept cutting and polishing yourself. He remembered that lesson that his teacher would preach time and time again. Clearly, this is what the Garnet of that reality learned when he visited a seminar in one of the galleries. The galleries being the legit front of the ring. Makes you think what the legit front of the pinky is. Probably a more brutal version of what's depicted in Fight Club. Except that everyone talks about what happens in that part of it. Well, the public parts anyway. He was then bothered by an unfamiliar scene. Briefly. But then he examined the jewel and considered it so beautiful. The gemstone itself glistened with a brilliant red hue, reminiscent of sunset. Ecstatic delight filled his eyes, beholding the luster of what he was seeing. This gem was made by trapping the rough gem in extreme heat and pressure until it's compressed into a single point. The process vivid in his head. The aesthetics of cruelty at the center of that precious stone. That implies that it was made by killing Carnelian in the most brutal way possible. Yeah. They make the straightforward brutality of the Fun and their subsidiaries look innocent. He wanted to see more. He wanted to see what splendor a gem of greater size would show him, such as the one made from a friend called Aqua. One that had clear blue eyes, resembling an ocean vibrant with life. Oh, so somewhere similar to the southern borders of District 19, 20, 21 and 22. If he could get a gem holding that, he would make it. Then he snapped out of it. as his real memory surfaced once more. The shock of processing his friends into luxury items? Yeah, he's made it clear there. He's a psychopath in that reality. He was willing to carry it out as soon as he had the method. He wasn't even sure if he had a friend called Aqua. The auctioneer wasn't sure why Garnet was crying, but it was because he was unsure of what was going on, as the memory of unknown origins became blurry, obstructing his vision and judgment. The auctioneer believed it to be Garnet being touched by the recognition of the true value of his artwork, glamorizing the tears as signs of overflowing gratitude shed by a moved artist. Well, he wasn't entirely wrong, just not for the reasons he believed it to be. He adored what that gem used to be, yet he lost it. He loathed that beautiful yet melancholic piece of work, not knowing why this feeling was invoked in him. Where the memories of Garnet the rookie fixer and Maestro Garnet, the higher-up of the ring, was going back and forth, as it was an uncut gem rather than a friend. The crowd was applauding, while he noticed eyes sending a piercing glare through a cracked window, pointing at him with sleeves belonging to different clothes, with mouths speaking Garnet. This made him stumble. He saw the lab in his reality of origin. He felt like a fraction of a second had passed, while also feeling that many lives had passed. The tubes were quiet. The voices were silenced. He saw what was in them, and he was shocked. He saw his friends wrapped up in some sort of translucent membrane. They were twitching irregularly, curled up like fetuses waiting to be birthed anew, rejecting all interference, yearning to return to that primary state. Just as he was overcome with vertigo and sickness, the world shifted once more. A foul performance relentlessly stabbed him, thousands of notes penetrating his body, echoing through the whole nest, all city dwellers standing in place, taking in the tidal waves of music. Burning anguish swelled in his heart. It was too hot for him to try and hold it in. What was before his eyes was beyond all belief. It was painful to look at. An occasion that brings a person to bloody tears. And not the kind that you'd find in a game where the forces of darkness are taken care of by S&M gear. He asked why he had to be robbed of his mundane happiness the instant he had it. Why was the Pagion that he bought crispier than ever today? He then said, "Sorry, Lapis. I was too late." Remembering that she liked the streets of music, that this tragedy could have been avoided if he could find a way to move into a nest. The piano had long ceased, but the sound stung him still. The performance might never end in his heart. Wait. Piano, Pagion, the loss of a loved one, streets of music. Yeah. Garnet in that reality was the Black Silence. A selfish hole who, after taking care of the pianist, would go on a rampage that would destroy what he had left in his life that was of worth. Where he was married to Lapis, who was the Angelica of that reality. It makes you wonder who the blue reverberation of that reality is, or Rachel Joker, as I call him. Regardless, he would live in regret for the rest of his life in that moment. Staring at the part of the grotesque piano with Angelica in it. Seeing the helplessness on her face. As she became part of the performance, the notes of blood raining from above. The silence. That was his own personal hell. His knees dropped to the ground, his legs fully bent, yet it didn't hurt. He then found himself on the cold floor of the lab. Dozens of worlds were crashing in, sweeping away in waves. He processed what was going on. First, he was a fixer of the streetlight office who lost his co-worker, where he and Lapis were in the same roles as Lulu and Mars. Then he was the director of She Association South Section 2, sending fixers to their doom, where he was in Yuzhen's role. Then he was a poverty-stricken job seeker in what would seem like a world that wouldn't be unrecognizable to us. Then he was a maester of the ring that had an obsession with beauty and art that would rival that of the Roman Emperor Nero. Then he was the Black Silence, who lost his family due to the pianist incident in District 9. The combined despair of his other selves was unbearably torturous. He wanted to take refuge at the edge of the world and turn his eyes from everything. Unfortunately, he still had much to deal with, too much to neglect or hide from. The memories experienced were harrowing, but the pain was proof of the love he held, where even if it was all fated to disappear without a trace one day, many things would shine while the moment was in his hands. Crossing that vast, harsh wilderness, metaphorically speaking, was not an insufferable task, thanks to the patches of flowers found along the way, the scent that his friends deserved to perceive. They weren't meant to be forsaken to such a fate in a place like that. Then he heard Maestro Jumsun speak in delight at Garnet, as his sanity remained intact at such a high refraction rate, wanting to get Mr. Stroud out of his chamber and put Garnet in there, seeing him as the brightest gem all along. Jumsun had a mesmerized look, a look that the Garnet from the reality where he was in his role had. It was repulsive to Garnet, the most disgusting pair of eyes out of all of those refracted. He's seen many pitiable, desolate and sorrowful eyes up until now, and considering that the average city dweller had been described as lemmings willingly jumping into a fire pit by a former OCD sufferer in the library, that's saying a lot. But, Maestro Jumsun was one that he couldn't stand. Even a minute's brush of eye contact engulfed him in uncontrollable fury. Jumsun saw that the experimental data was almost complete. A little more was needed and it can be perfected. The glass window. Garnet remembered this, engraving those moments in his memory. The pain forced into a knife that would cut through his heart. The guilt he was feeling. Along with that he felt from his friends laid inside those machines. He had the determination to keep these feelings with him, rather than shake them off. His body was in complete disorder. His left upper torso was that of the streetlight office, Garnet. The right upper torso was that of the Black Silence version of Garnet, and the lower half was that of the Maestro Garnet of the Ring. But his mind was able to confront what was in front of him directly. "You," he declared as he adjusted his half-crumpled mask, feeling the silence surrounding him in darkness radiating outward. "You'll die by my hands, in the most painful way imaginable." It seems that the refraction/identities technology allows for access to other realities, where the memories and abilities of other selves can be utilized. And according to Maestro Jumsun, it's almost perfected. This also highlighted the cruelty of the ring, that they're willing to make others suffer for the art that they display and auction off. Oh yes, and one of the realities shown here was rather interesting. It stood out, as it was either a world similar to ours, or a world where the disasters that would make the city what it was now, they never happened. One thing is clear. Garnet is stronger than he was in his current state. Well, certainly compared to what he was before, even considering he was loaned the gladiescent coat of Virgilius, the Red Gaze. Also, access to other worlds. Yes, parallel worlds. This is similar to the ability that Iori, the Purple Tear, has. Although she can only travel to other realities, she can't access the memories and abilities of her other selves. And to be honest, she's so powerful as she is, why would she need to? As for Maestro Jumsun and the turncoat Nuncio, unless they have something up their sleeves, they're in deep. There's also the question of where Virgilius is. Well, if not a lot of time has passed since Garnet was subjected to what he went through in this, then he probably hasn't caught up with them yet, even with his augmentations. I doubt that he'll be happy with the ring, and might not hold back with his power, a possible EGO/psychomant. Well, it's at least some kind of augmentation fueled by strong emotion. We might even see how much damage it can do at full power. It might even give the Red Mist at her strongest a run for her money. As for Garnet, I think we can guess what's coming next, don't we? Something which is not uncommon within the city. Something which, to some, it's the only thing they truly understand. And that is overwhelming violence. Hard to know who's underestimating whom. Maestro Jumsun or Garnet? Well, we'll find out in the next book of Leviathan. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!